The bullet missed Jasper Langford's head by 3 inches, embedding itself in the pine trunk behind him with a sharp crack that sent bark exploding into the morning air. He did not flinch. The grizzled mountain man simply turned his weathered face toward the direction of the shot, his gray-blue eyes narrowing as he calculated the trajectory. His massive frame remained still as stone, muscles coiled beneath his buckskin shirt as he waited to see if another shot would follow. When none came, he knew it was not an ambush but a warning. Someone wanted him to know they were out there in the Montana wilderness, watching. It was June of 1878, and Jasper had been living in these mountains above Miles City for nearly 8 years. At 32, he had left civilization behind after the war, unable to stomach the crowds and noise and expectations of a world that made little sense to him anymore. The mountains made sense. They were honest in their brutality, fair in their beauty, and asked nothing of a man except that he be strong enough to survive them. Jasper was strong enough. Standing 6 feet 4 inches tall with shoulders broad as an ox yoke and arms thick with muscle, earned from splitting wood and hauling traps and wrestling nature itself, he was built for this life. His dark hair hung past his collar, often tied back with a leather cord, and his jaw was covered with a thick beard that he trimmed only when it grew long enough to annoy him. He traced the trajectory back to a rocky outcrop about 200 yards east and began walking toward it with long, steady strides. His hand rested on the knife at his belt, but he did not draw his rifle. If they had wanted him dead, the shot would have found its mark. Jasper was known throughout the territory as the best tracker and hunter in Montana, but he also had a reputation for being fair and for keeping his word. He wondered who had come looking for him and why they thought a warning shot was necessary. As he approached the outcrop, he heard the sound of a horse whinnying nervously. Then he heard something else, a woman's voice, low and urgent, trying to calm the animal. Jasper slowed his approach, his curiosity piqued. Women were rare in these mountains, and those who came usually did so with husbands or families, not alone. "You can come out," he called, his deep voice carrying easily through the thin mountain air. "I know you are there." There was a moment of silence, then the sound of boots scrambling over rock. A figure appeared at the edge of the outcrop, silhouetted against the bright morning sky. As she climbed down, Jasper got his first good look at her, and something in his chest tightened in a way he had not felt in years. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with hair the color of autumn wheat that had come loose from its pins and hung in wild tangles around her face. Her dress was torn and dirty, the hem ragged as though she had been traveling hard through rough country. But it was her eyes that caught him, green as new pine needles and filled with a fierce determination that bordered on desperation. She held an old Henry rifle in her hands, the barrel still pointed roughly in his direction, though her arms trembled with either exhaustion or fear. "Stay back," she said, her voice hoarse. "I am warning you." Jasper raised his hands slowly, palms out. "You already warned me with that shot, missed on purpose, I am guessing, or you would not be shaking so hard now." Her jaw tightened. "I am a good shot when I need to be. I just did not want to kill you without cause." "Appreciate that," Jasper said dryly. "You want to tell me why you are shooting at people in my territory, or should I just guess? Your territory." She lowered the rifle slightly, confusion crossing her face. "These are public lands." "Technically, yes. Practically, I am the only person who lives up here, and I do not take kindly to strangers shooting at me." He took a step closer, and she immediately raised the rifle again. He stopped. "Easy now. I am not going to hurt you. But you look about half dead, and if you are running from something, you are not going to make it much farther without help." "I do not need your help," she said, but her voice wavered. As if to prove her wrong, her knees suddenly buckled, and she staggered. Jasper moved without thinking, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides and catching her before she hit the ground. The rifle fell from her hands as she gasped, her fingers clutching at his shirt. "When did you last eat?" he asked, his voice gentler now as he steadied her. I do not remember," she admitted, her pride clearly warred with her desperation. 2 days, maybe 3. Jasper swore under his breath. He could feel how thin she was beneath the layers of her traveling dress, could see the hollows under her cheekbones. "My cabin is about a mile north." "Can you ride?" "I can ride," she said, pulling away from him with effort. "But I cannot go to Miles City. They will find me there." "Who will find you?" She looked at him for a long moment, weighing whether to trust him. Finally, she said, "Men who think they own me. Men who are wrong." Jasper felt a familiar anger kindle in his gut. He had seen enough in his years to know what kind of men she meant. "My cabin is not in Miles City. It is up here in the mountains. No one comes here unless I invite them, and I do not invite many people." He picked up her fallen rifle and handed it back to her. "You can keep this if it makes you feel safer, but I am offering you food and shelter, nothing more. You can leave whenever you want." She studied his face, those green eyes searching for deception or hidden motives. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. "My name is Beatrice Walsh, Jasper Langford." He gestured toward where her horse was tied. "Let us get you mounted and back to the cabin before you collapse on me again." The ride back to his cabin was slow. Beatrice's horse, a rangy bay gelding that looked as exhausted as she did, could barely manage more than a walk. Jasper led them along paths that only he knew, trails that wound through dense pine forests and across streams swollen with snowmelt. He watched Beatrice from the corner of his eye, noting how she swayed in the saddle but refused to complain or ask to stop. His cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, with a creek running behind it and a view of the valley below that stretched for miles. It was solid and well built, constructed from logs he had cut and hauled himself. Smoke rose from the stone chimney, indicating that the fire he had left that morning was still burning. Jasper dismounted and moved to help Beatrice down, but she had already slid from the saddle on her own. Her legs nearly gave out again, and this time he simply swept her up into his arms without asking permission. She made a small sound of protest, but was too weak to struggle. "Save your strength," he said, carrying her toward the cabin. "You can fight me later when you have eaten." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A large bed occupied one corner, piled with furs and blankets. A table and 2 chairs sat near the fireplace, and shelves lined the walls, holding supplies and equipment. Jasper set Beatrice down in one of the chairs and immediately began preparing food. He sliced thick pieces of bread from a loaf he had baked 2 days earlier, then heated leftover venison stew in a pot over the fire. Beatrice watched him move around the cabin with surprising efficiency for a man his size. "You live here alone?" she asked. "For 8 years now," he said, stirring the stew. "Before that, I was a scout for the army. Before that, I was a farmer's son in Ohio who did not want to be a farmer." He ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of her along with the bread. "Eat slowly. Your stomach is going to rebel if you go too fast." She picked up the spoon with trembling hands and took a bite. He saw her eyes close as the warm food hit her system, saw the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. While she ate, he tended to her horse, unsaddling the gelding and rubbing him down before giving him grain and water. When he returned to the cabin, Beatrice had finished the stew and was staring into the fire. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jasper poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. "You want to tell me who is after you, Or would you rather wait until you have slept? I do not know if I can sleep, she admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I think I hear them coming. He sat down across from her, his large frame making the chair seem small. Then tell me. Sometimes talking helps. Beatrice wrapped her hands around the cup, drawing warmth from it. I came to Montana 6 months ago from Kansas. My father died last year and there was nothing left for me there. I heard there were opportunities out here for teachers, for women who could work. I thought I could start over, make a new life. What happened? I found work in Miles City, teaching at the schoolhouse. It was good work, honest work. But there was a man, Carter Briggs. He owns half the town, has his hands in every business from the saloon to the mining operations. He decided he wanted me. Her voice hardened. I made it clear I was not interested. He did not care. Jasper's jaw tightened. Did he hurt you? He tried. I fought him off, and his pride could not stomach that. He told everyone I was a loose woman, that I had been taking money from men, doing things no decent woman would do. The lies spread like wildfire. I lost my position at the school. The boarding house where I was staying threw me out. She met his eyes. 3 nights ago, he sent his men to take me, said he was going to teach me a lesson about refusing him. I ran. Smart decision, Jasper said. His voice was calm, but fury burned beneath it. He knew men like Carter Briggs had encountered them throughout his life. Men who thought power gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. You have been in the mountains for 3 days with no supplies. I had some food, but it ran out. I have been drinking from streams and trying to stay ahead of them. I saw your cabin yesterday and watched it for a while, trying to figure out if you were one of them. When you left this morning, I thought about breaking in to steal food, but I could not bring myself to do it. Then I heard you coming back and I panicked. I fired the warning shot to keep you away. She looked down at her hands. I am sorry. You did not deserve that. No harm done, Jasper said. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the valley. Dusk was beginning to settle, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Briggs's men are not going to find you here. These mountains are my home and I know every inch of them. Even if they somehow tracked you this far, which I doubt, I will see them coming long before they see this cabin. Why are you helping me? Beatrice asked. You do not know me. For all you know, everything I just told you is a lie. Jasper turned back to face her. I do not think you are lying. And even if you were, you are still a woman alone in the wilderness with no supplies and no strength left. What kind of man would I be if I turned you away? He crossed his arms over his broad chest. Besides, I have spent 8 years avoiding people because most of them are not worth the trouble. You might be the exception. Something flickered in Beatrice's eyes, an emotion he could not quite name. People in town, if they know about you, they probably told you I would only bring trouble. They would be right, Jasper said with a slight smile. Briggs is not going to let this go easily. By helping you, I am making myself a target. He shrugged his massive shoulders. But I have dealt with worse trouble than some tin-pot tyrant from Miles City. I do not want to bring danger to your door, Beatrice said, but her voice was heavy with exhaustion. Too late for that. The danger is already here. He gestured toward the bed. You need to sleep. Take the bed, I will keep watch. I cannot take your bed, she protested. You can and you will. I have slept on the floor more times than I can count. One more night will not kill me. His tone left no room for argument. Go on. You are about to fall out of that chair. Beatrice wanted to argue further. He could see it in her face, but her body had reached its limit. She stood on shaking legs and made her way to the bed, not even bothering to remove her boots before collapsing onto it. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Jasper pulled a blanket from a chest and settled himself near the door, his rifle across his lap. He did not expect trouble tonight, but years of living in the wilderness had taught him never to let his guard down completely. As he sat in the darkness, listening to Beatrice's quiet breathing, he found himself thinking about the way she had looked at him when he offered help. Suspicious but hopeful, desperate but proud. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him with anything other than wariness or fear. He was not a fool. He knew that taking her in would complicate his life in ways he could not yet predict. But as he had told her, some things were worth the trouble. And something about Beatrice Walsh, with her fierce green eyes and her refusal to give up even when the world had turned against her, made him think she might be worth any trouble that came with her. The night passed quietly, and when dawn broke over the mountains, Jasper rose and started a fire. The smell of coffee brewing eventually woke Beatrice. She sat up slowly, confusion crossing her face before memory returned. She looked around the cabin until her eyes found him by the fireplace. "You let me sleep all night," she said. "You needed it," he replied, pouring coffee. "How do you feel? Better? Stronger?" She swung her legs off the bed and stood, testing her balance. "I should go. I have imposed on you enough." "Go where?" Jasper asked reasonably. "You have no supplies, and your horse needs rest as much as you did. Besides, Briggs's men might still be searching. Give it a few more days. Let them think you died out here or moved on to another territory. Then we will figure out what to do next." Beatrice wanted to argue, he could see it in the set of her jaw, but logic won out. "A few days," she agreed, "but I will earn my keep. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I will not be a burden." "Fair enough," Jasper said. He handed her the coffee. "But first, breakfast." "Then I need to check my trap lines. You can come with me if you are feeling up to it, or you can rest here." "I will come," she said immediately. "I do not want to be alone, and I want to learn the area in case I need to run again." They set out after breakfast, Jasper leading the way along paths that were barely visible to the untrained eye. He moved through the forest like a part of it, reading signs in bent grass and broken twigs that told him which animals had passed and when. Beatrice followed, trying to step where he stepped, learning as they went. "You said you were a scout during the war," she said as they walked. "Which side?" "Union," Jasper replied. "My father was against slavery, raised me to believe all men were equal. When the war came, I signed up." His voice was matter of fact, neither proud nor ashamed. "I was good at it, the scouting, could move quiet and read terrain better than most, but I saw things during those years that I would rather forget." "Is that why you came here, to forget?" "Partly. Also because I got tired of following orders from men who did not know what they were doing. Got tired of watching good men die for bad decisions." He stopped at a trap, finding it empty, and reset it. "Up here, the only orders I follow are my own, and if I make a bad decision, I am the only one who pays for it." "That must be lonely," Beatrice observed. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but loneliness is better than being surrounded by people and feeling alone anyway." He glanced back at her. "You know what I mean," she nodded slowly. "Yes, I felt that way in Kansas after my father died. Everyone was kind, but no one really understood. They all wanted me to marry quickly, to let some man take care of me, as if I were incapable of taking care of myself." "Are you incapable, I mean?" "No," she said firmly. "I ran my father's household for 3 years while he was ill. I managed the money, made sure we did not lose the farm, took care of him until the end. I am perfectly capable. I just wanted the chance to prove it on my own terms." Jasper smiled slightly. "Then we have that in common. We both came to Montana to live on our own terms." He moved on to the next trap, this one holding a rabbit. He dispatched it quickly and efficiently, adding it to the game bag at his belt. "Briggs tried to take that away from you." "Yes," Beatrice said, anger flashing in her eyes. "He thought because he had money and influence he could own me. When I refused, he tried to destroy me, and he almost succeeded." "Almost," Jasper agreed. "But you are still here, still fighting. That takes strength." They continued checking traps, and Jasper found himself enjoying her company more than he had expected. She asked intelligent questions, learned quickly, and did not chatter needlessly. By the time they returned to the cabin, the sun was high overhead, and he had 3 rabbits and a marten. Over the next few days, they fell into an easy routine. Jasper taught Beatrice how to skin game, how to read weather signs, how to move quietly through the forest. She, in turn, brought order to his cabin, mending clothes that had needed attention for months, organizing supplies, cooking meals that were far better than his usual simple fare. They talked while they worked, sharing stories from their pasts, learning about each other in the casual way of people who spent long hours together. Jasper found himself looking forward to these conversations, to the sound of her voice filling the cabin that had been silent for so long. He noticed small things about her. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, the determination in her movements even when exhaustion weighed on her. He also noticed the way his own body responded to her presence, the way his pulse quickened when she stood close, the way he found excuses to touch her hand or shoulder. It had been years since he had felt attraction to anyone, and the strength of what he felt now both surprised and unnerved him. On the 4th day, Jasper rode down to a point where he could observe the trails leading up from Miles City. He spent hours watching, and eventually his patience was rewarded. 3 men on horseback were moving slowly along the lower trails, clearly searching. He recognized one of them, a hired gun named Frank Decker who did Briggs's dirty work. Jasper watched until they gave up and turned back toward town, then returned to the cabin. Beatrice was outside, hanging clothes to dry on a line he had strung between 2 trees. She looked up as he approached, and he saw the question in her eyes. "They are still looking," he said, dismounting, "but they are searching the wrong areas. They will not find this place." Relief and worry warred on her face. "How long will they keep searching?" "Hard to say. Depends on how obsessed Briggs is and how much money he is willing to spend on hired men." Jasper unsaddled his horse and turned the animal into the small corral he had built. "But eventually they will give up. They have to. Winter will be here in a few months, and no one in their right mind searches these mountains in winter." "So I just hide here until they give up?" Beatrice asked. "That could be months. Is that such a terrible prospect?" The question came out before he could stop it, and he saw surprise flicker across her face. "I did not mean it that way," she said quickly. "You have been nothing but kind to me, but I cannot hide forever. I need to figure out what to do with my life, where to go." Jasper stepped closer to her, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "Maybe you do not need to go anywhere. Maybe you could stay here." "Stay here." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "In the mountains? Why not? You have learned quickly. You are strong, capable." "And I?" He hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I have gotten used to having you here. The cabin does not feel empty anymore." Beatrice looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Jasper, I cannot ask you to. You are not asking, I am offering." He reached out and gently tucked that errant strand of hair behind her ear, his rough fingers lingering for a moment against the softness of her skin. "These past few days have reminded me of something I thought I had forgotten, what it feels like to have someone to talk to share the day with. What it feels like to care about someone." "You care about me?" The question was soft, vulnerable. "Yes," he said simply. "I know it has only been a few days, but yes, you make me feel less alone, Beatrice, and I hope maybe I do the same for you." She reached up and placed her hand over his where it still rested near her face. "You do. More than I can explain. When I was running, I was so scared, not just of being caught, but of being alone forever. Then I found you, and for the first time in months, I felt safe. I felt like maybe there was still good in the world. Jasper cupped her face in his large, calloused hand, marveling at how delicate she seemed compared to his rough exterior. There is good in the world. Sometimes you just have to look harder to find it. They stood like that for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Beatrice rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his, a gentle kiss that held both question and answer. Jasper responded carefully, aware of his own strength, not wanting to overwhelm her. When they parted, both of them were breathing harder. "I would like to stay," Beatrice said. "If the offer is genuine." "It is," Jasper assured her. "More than anything, I want you to stay." The next weeks passed in a blur of work and growing affection. Jasper taught Beatrice to shoot more accurately, to track animals, to preserve meat and vegetables for the coming winter. She taught him things too, though she did not realize it. How to laugh again, how to share his thoughts without fear of judgment, how to let someone into the guarded spaces of his heart. They also learned each other's bodies, slowly and with great tenderness. Jasper had been with women before, but never like this, never with someone he cared for so deeply. He was always gentle with her, aware of the trauma she had experienced, letting her set the pace. Beatrice, for her part, found healing in his touch, in the way he made her feel cherished rather than claimed. One evening in late July, as they sat outside watching the sun set over the valley, Beatrice said, "I want to go to Miles City." Jasper turned to her, surprise and concern warring in his expression. "Why? It is not safe." "I know, but I cannot hide forever, and I will not let Carter Briggs keep me prisoner up here, no matter how beautiful the prison." She met his eyes steadily. "I want to face him, to let everyone know that his lies did not break me, and I want them to know that I have found something better than anything he could have offered." "You have a plan?" Jasper asked, though he could already feel his protective instincts roaring to life. "Not yet, but I will. And I want you with me." She took his hand. "I know you avoid town, and I know this will be difficult for you, but I need you there. I need people to see that I am not alone, that someone believes in me." Jasper was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks. Finally, he squeezed her hand. "Then we will go together. But we do it smart, and we do it on our terms." They spent the next few days preparing. Jasper rode down to a neighboring valley where a prospector named Tom Harris lived. Tom was one of the few people Jasper considered a friend, and he owed Jasper several favors. After hearing the story, Tom agreed to ride into Miles City and do some reconnaissance, finding out what the situation was with Briggs and his search for Beatrice. Tom returned 2 days later with news. "Briggs is still convinced you are out there somewhere," he told Beatrice. "He has men watching the roads in and out of town. But he has also told everyone you probably died in the mountains, that you were too weak and foolish to survive out here alone." "Good," Beatrice said, a plan forming in her mind. "Let him think that. It will make our entrance all the more dramatic." They chose a Sunday morning for their arrival, knowing the church service would have just ended, and the main street would be full of people. Jasper had not been to Miles City in over a year, and he felt the familiar discomfort of civilization pressing in on him as they rode into town. But Beatrice's hand was steady in his, her back straight, her head high. People started noticing them immediately. A woman gasped, a man shouted, and soon a crowd was gathering. Jasper kept his horse close to Beatrice's, his eyes scanning for threats. He saw the moment when someone ran to alert Briggs because the crowd's attention shifted. Carter Briggs emerged from the saloon, a man of medium height with graying hair and expensive clothes. His face went red when he saw Beatrice. "You," he snarled, starting toward her. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here." "I have a lot of nerve." Beatrice's voice rang out clear and strong. "You spread lies about me. You tried to have your men attack me. You drove me from my home, and I have nerve." "You are a liar and a whore," Briggs spat, and Jasper saw several people in the crowd flinch at the language. "You took money from men. I did no such thing, and you know it," Beatrice interrupted. "You wanted me, I refused, and you could not stand it. So you destroyed my reputation and tried to force me to submit. But I am still here, Mr. Briggs, and I am not afraid of you anymore." "You should be," Briggs threatened, taking another step forward. That was when Jasper dismounted, placing himself between Briggs and Beatrice. The mountain man said nothing, simply stood there, his massive frame and calm demeanor making his message clear. Briggs stopped, his eyes widening slightly as he took in Jasper's size and the easy confidence with which he carried himself. "Who the hell are you?" "Jasper Langford," he said quietly. "And Miss Walsh is under my protection. You would do well to remember that." "Langford," Briggs repeated, recognition dawning. "The mountain man. You are a hermit. What do you care about what happens in town?" "I care when a bully tries to hurt someone I love," Jasper said, and he saw Beatrice's sharp intake of breath at his words. "I care when lies are spread about a good woman, and I care when men like you think power gives them the right to do whatever they want." A murmur went through the crowd. Jasper noticed the sheriff standing at the edge of the gathering, a weathered man named Bill Cooper who had always struck him as fair. Their eyes met, and Cooper gave a small nod, stepping forward. "That is enough, Briggs," Cooper said. "We all heard what Mr. Langford and Miss Walsh said. And to be honest, a lot of us had our doubts about your story from the beginning. Miss Walsh was a good teacher, and she never gave anyone cause to think poorly of her until you started spreading rumors." "You are going to believe her over me," Briggs demanded. "I own half this town." "You own property," Cooper corrected. "You do not own people, and you do not own the truth." He looked at Beatrice. "Miss Walsh, I apologize on behalf of this town for what happened to you. If you would be willing to give a statement about Briggs's actions and the actions of his men, I would be interested in hearing it." Beatrice dismounted, and Jasper stayed close to her side as she approached the sheriff. "I would be happy to give a statement, Sheriff Cooper. And I have names of the men he sent after me." Over the next hour, the story came out. Beatrice told her side, and several townspeople who had witnessed Briggs's harassment came forward to corroborate it. The owner of the boarding house admitted, shamefaced, that Briggs had paid her to throw Beatrice out. The chairman of the school board confessed that Briggs had threatened to pull funding unless they dismissed her. By the time it was over, Briggs's reputation was in tatters, and Sheriff Cooper had enough to charge him with harassment and attempted assault. Briggs was led away, sputtering threats and promises of revenge that no one took seriously. As the crowd dispersed, several people approached Beatrice to apologize. She accepted their apologies with grace, though Jasper could see the strain in her face. When they were finally alone again, heading back toward their horses, she leaned against him. "I did not think that would work," she admitted quietly. "You were brave," Jasper said, "and you were right. Standing up to him was the only way to take back your life." "Our life," Beatrice corrected, looking up at him. "You said you loved me in front of everyone." "I did," he confirmed. "Because it is true. I love you, Beatrice Walsh. I think I have loved you since you tried to warn me away with that terrible shot." She laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "It was not that terrible. I hit what I was aiming at." "The tree behind me," he teased, and she swatted his arm. "I was aiming to miss you, as you well know." Her expression sobered. "I love you too, Jasper. You saved me in more ways than one. You gave me a home, safety, and something I did not think I would ever find. A man who sees me as an equal, who respects my strength even while offering his own." "Then marry me," Jasper said. The words surprised him as much as they surprised her, but once they were out, he knew they were right. "Marry me and let us build a life together in those mountains. I know it is not an easy life, but—" "Yes," Beatrice interrupted. "Yes, I will marry you. The mountains are home now, because you are there." They were married a week later by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Miles City. Tom Harris stood as Jasper's witness, and a woman named Sarah Chen, who had been kind to Beatrice during her time teaching, stood for her. It was a simple ceremony, but when Jasper slipped a ring carved from mountain laurel wood onto Beatrice's finger, both of them had tears in their eyes. After the wedding, they returned to the cabin, but it felt different now. It was not just Jasper's place anymore, it was theirs. Beatrice brought small changes: curtains for the windows, herbs growing in a garden plot she cleared, the sound of her singing as she worked. Jasper found himself smiling more, talking more, opening up parts of himself he had kept locked away for years. As summer turned to fall, they worked together to prepare for winter. Jasper hunted elk and deer, smoking and preserving the meat. Beatrice gathered berries and roots, drying them for the long months ahead. They reinforced the cabin's walls, stacked firewood 8 feet high, and made sure they had enough supplies to last through even the worst storms. In late September, Beatrice told him she was pregnant. Jasper's initial reaction was fear that something would go wrong, that he would lose her, that he was not ready to be a father. But as those fears settled, joy rose to replace them. A child. Their child. A family growing in the wilderness they both loved. Winter came hard that year, with snows that lasted for weeks and temperatures that dropped so low the creek froze solid. But inside the cabin, there was warmth. Jasper and Beatrice spent the long, dark evenings talking, reading from the few books they owned, planning for the future. He carved a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. She sewed tiny clothes from soft flannel, her face glowing with anticipation. When spring arrived and the snows finally melted, Beatrice's belly was round and full. She moved more slowly now, but she still insisted on helping with chores, on going for short walks to feel the sun on her face. Jasper hovered, protective and anxious, until she laughingly told him she was not made of glass. Their son was born on a warm day in May of 1879, with only Jasper there to help. It was the most terrifying and exhilarating experience of his life, but when he held that tiny squalling infant in his massive hands, something inside him shifted permanently. This small person, created from his love for Beatrice, represented hope and possibility in a way he had never imagined. They named him William after Beatrice's father and called him Will. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and he filled the cabin with noise and joy. Jasper discovered that he loved being a father, loved teaching his son about the world the same way he had taught Beatrice. As Will grew from infant to toddler to young boy, Jasper showed him how to track animals, how to read the weather, how to respect the power of the wilderness. But they did not raise Will in isolation. Every few months, they made the trip down to Miles City, where Beatrice had re-established her reputation and where Will could play with other children. The town had changed after Briggs's downfall. New people had moved in, good people who were building something lasting. Jasper found that he no longer dreaded these visits as much, though he was always relieved to return to the mountains. When Will was 3, Beatrice became pregnant again, and their daughter arrived in the spring of 1882. They named her Rose, and she was a perfect complement to her brother, quiet where he was loud, thoughtful where he was impulsive. Jasper held her and marveled at how tiny she was, at the trust in her eyes as she looked up at him. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were harsh winters, close calls with wildlife, illnesses that had them worried sick. But there was also joy, so much joy. The sound of children's laughter echoing through the pines. Beatrice's hand in his as they watched the sun set over the valley. The satisfaction of building something lasting with his own hands. In the summer of 1885, when Will was 6 and Rose was 3, they had visitors. Tom Harris arrived with news that Carter Briggs had died. He had drunk himself to death, Tom said, unable to accept the loss of his power and reputation. Jasper felt no satisfaction at the news, only a distant pity for a man who had wasted his life trying to control others. After Tom left, Jasper and Beatrice sat together on the porch they had built the previous summer, watching their children play in the clearing. Will was teaching Rose how to skip stones in the creek, his small face serious with concentration. "You ever regret it?" Jasper asked. "Giving up teaching, living up here away from everything?" Beatrice leaned her head against his shoulder. "Never, not once. This life we built, this family, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." She smiled. "You know what Tom said to me before he left? He said everyone in Miles City talks about us. They say you are the mountain man who found trouble in the form of a woman, and that some people warned you I would bring nothing but hardship." "They did warn me," Jasper acknowledged. "More than once. And what do you tell them?" Jasper turned to look at her, this woman who had stumbled into his life and changed everything. Her hair had a few silver threads now, and there were lines around her eyes from squinting in the sun. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "I tell them they were right," he said. "You did bring trouble. Your arrival forced me out of my isolation, made me face the world again, challenged me in ways I had not been challenged in years. It would have been easier to send you away, to keep living alone." Beatrice pulled back, hurt flashing across her face. "Jasper," he caught her hands, holding them gently. "Let me finish. You brought trouble, yes, but you also brought joy. So much joy that it made every bit of trouble worth it. You brought love and laughter and purpose. You gave me a family, a reason to look forward to tomorrow instead of just surviving today." He raised one of her hands to his lips. "I tell them that the trouble you brought was nothing compared to the happiness, and that I would choose you, choose this life, every single time." Tears shimmered in Beatrice's eyes. "I love you," she whispered. "Then, now, always." "And I love you," Jasper replied. "More than I have words for." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun. In the distance, the mountains rose against the sky, eternal and unchanging. But here in this small clearing surrounded by the forest, a family had taken root and flourished against all odds. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Will grew tall and strong like his father, with the same quiet competence and love for the wilderness. Rose developed her mother's fierce independence and sharp mind, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. In 1888, when Will was 9 and Rose was 6, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first two, and Jasper worried constantly. But she carried the child to term, and in early 1889 they welcomed another son. They named him Thomas, after Tom Harris, who had become like family to them. Tom the elder was delighted with his namesake and became the baby's godfather. He visited more often after that, bringing news from the wider world and gifts for the children. Sometimes he stayed for weeks, helping with the work and filling the cabin with his stories. It was during one of Tom's visits, in the summer of 1890, that they received an unexpected offer. The territorial government was looking for experienced guides and scouts to help map the region and assist with establishing new settlements. They wanted Jasper specifically, having heard of his knowledge and skills. The pay was good, good enough that Jasper seriously considered it. But after talking with Beatrice, he turned it down. The job would have meant long absences from home, weeks or months at a time away from his family. And he had learned over the years with Beatrice what truly mattered. The money would be nice, he told the government representative who had ridden all the way up to make the offer in person. But I have everything I need right here. A wife I love, healthy children, a good life. I am not interested in trading that for any amount of pay. The representative was disappointed but understanding. Before he left, he said, "You are a lucky man, Mr. Langford." "I know," Jasper replied, watching Beatrice play with Thomas in the sunshine. "Believe me, I know." As Montana moved toward statehood, which it would achieve in 1889, the territory around Miles City continued to develop. More settlers arrived, more towns sprang up. But the mountains where the Langfords lived remained largely untouched, too rugged and remote for most people to consider settling. This suited Jasper and Beatrice perfectly. They wanted their children to grow up with the freedom of the wilderness, to learn self-reliance and respect for nature. But they also made sure the children were educated. Beatrice taught them to read and write, to work with numbers, to think critically. Jasper taught them practical skills: hunting, tracking, building, surviving. Will showed an early aptitude for working with wood like his father. By the time he was 12, he was creating beautiful carvings and helping Jasper with construction projects. Rose, at 9, was fascinated by plants and spent hours with her mother learning which ones were edible, which were medicinal, which were poisonous. Thomas, the youngest, was still small but showed signs of having inherited his parents' best traits, his father's steadiness and his mother's curiosity. He followed his older siblings everywhere, trying to keep up, learning by watching. In the fall of 1892, a circuit preacher who knew the family brought troubling news. There had been an outbreak of illness in Miles City, a fever that had claimed several lives. Jasper and Beatrice made the difficult decision to keep the children home that winter, avoiding town until the danger passed. It was a long winter, made longer by isolation, but they made the best of it. Jasper told stories around the fire in the evenings, tales from his time as a scout, from his childhood in Ohio, from the years before Beatrice arrived. Beatrice taught the children songs her father had taught her. They played games, read books, and grew closer as a family. When spring came and they learned the outbreak had passed, they ventured down to Miles City again. The town had changed, grown larger and more prosperous. The school had expanded, and the new teacher, a young woman from Boston, was eager to meet Beatrice, having heard stories about the former teacher who had stood up to corruption. They talked for over an hour, and when they parted, the young woman asked if Beatrice would consider coming back to teach. Beatrice thanked her but declined. "My teaching days are behind me," she said kindly, "but if you ever need advice or help, you know where to find me." On the ride back to the mountains, Will asked, "Mama, do you miss it? Teaching in town?" Beatrice considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss parts of it," she admitted. "I enjoyed helping children learn, watching their faces when they understood something new. But I have that with you three, and I have so much more besides. So no, I do not regret my choice." "Would you have stayed in Miles City if not for Father?" Rose asked. "If not for your father, I probably would not have survived," Beatrice said honestly. "Briggs would have caught me, or I would have died in the wilderness. But even if I had survived and stayed in town, I would not have been happy. I would have been safe, perhaps, but not truly alive. Your father gave me life, real life." Jasper reached over and squeezed her hand, and she smiled at him with all the love of their years together. By 1895, Will was 16 and beginning to think about his future. He loved the mountains and wanted to stay, but he also felt a pull toward working with wood in a more formal capacity. After much discussion, Jasper and Beatrice agreed to let him spend a season apprenticing with a furniture maker in Miles City. It was hard to let him go, even temporarily, but they knew it was important. Will needed to see the world beyond the mountains, to make his own choices about what kind of life he wanted. When he returned in the fall, he was full of stories about his time in town, but also full of relief to be home. "I learned a lot," he told his parents, "and I liked the work. But the town feels crowded and noisy. I kept wishing I was back here." He looked at his father. "I want to build furniture, but I want to do it here on our land. Is that all right?" Jasper clapped his son on the shoulder, pride swelling in his chest. "It is more than all right. We will build you a workshop." They spent the winter planning and the following spring building. By summer, Will had his own workshop separate from the main cabin, with good light and space for his tools. He began creating beautiful pieces: tables, chairs, cabinets, carved with designs inspired by the wilderness around them. Word spread, and people began commissioning work from him. Rose, meanwhile, had developed into a skilled healer. She worked with her mother, learning everything Beatrice knew about medicinal plants, and then sought out knowledge from others. An elderly woman from the Crow tribe who lived nearby taught her additional remedies and techniques. By the time she was 14, Rose was treating minor injuries and illnesses for the family and neighbors. Thomas, at 6, was still young but showing promise as a tracker and hunter. He could already identify dozens of animal tracks and moved through the forest with surprising stealth for someone so small. Watching his children grow and develop their own skills and interests filled Jasper with a satisfaction he had never known existed. This was what life was meant to be, he thought. Building something that would last beyond yourself, raising children who would carry your values forward. In the spring of 1897, Jasper turned 51. He was graying now, and his body carried the aches of years of hard work, but he was still strong, still capable. Beatrice, at 42, had silver threading through her wheat-colored hair and lines on her face that spoke of laughter and worry in equal measure. She was as beautiful to him as she had been that first day, standing on the outcrop with her rifle and her fierce determination. They celebrated his birthday quietly, just the family and Tom Harris, who brought a cake that Beatrice had secretly arranged for him to purchase in town. As they sat around the table that evening, Jasper looked at each face. Beatrice, who had saved him as much as he had saved her. Will, steady and talented. Rose, fierce and kind. Thomas, curious and brave. Tom, loyal and true. "I want to say something," Jasper announced, and everyone fell quiet. 18 years ago, I was living alone in these mountains, convinced that isolation was the only life for me. Then a woman fired a warning shot past my head and everything changed. Beatrice laughed, her eyes bright. "I have apologized for that." "I am glad you have not apologized for anything else," Jasper continued, "because everything that has happened since that day has been the greatest gift of my life. This family, this home, this life we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed of having." "We are the lucky ones, Father," Will said. "You and Mother taught us what it means to be strong and kind, to work hard and love deeply. That is a legacy worth more than anything." "Hear, hear," Tom agreed, raising his glass. "To Jasper and Beatrice Langford, who proved that even a mountain man can find his match, and that love is worth any trouble it brings." They all drank to that, and the evening continued with more food, more stories, more laughter. Later, when the children were asleep and Tom had retired to the workshop where he was bunking, Jasper and Beatrice stood outside under the stars. "You remember what you told me that first day?" Beatrice asked. "You said these mountains were honest in their brutality and fair in their beauty." "I remember," Jasper said. "I think the same could be said about life," she mused. "It has been brutal sometimes. Losing my father, running from Briggs, the hard winters, the scares with the children when they were sick. But it has also been so beautiful. Every day with you has been beautiful." Jasper pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "When people warned me you would bring trouble, they were looking at it all wrong. The trouble was not the problem. The problem was living a life without purpose, without love. You gave me both. You gave me everything." "And you gave me a home," Beatrice replied. "Not just a place, but a feeling. Safety, love, belonging. Everything I was searching for when I came to Montana." They stood together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night forest, feeling the gentle breeze that carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Around them, the mountains stood eternal, silent witnesses to the life they had built in this remote corner of the world. The years continued their steady march forward. In 1899, Rose, at 17, fell in love with a young man from Miles City whose father was a doctor. He was educated, kind, and respectful, and most importantly, he did not ask Rose to give up her healing work. Jasper and Beatrice approved, and the wedding was held at the cabin, with the whole community from town making the trek up the mountain. Will, at 20, was courting a girl who had moved to the area from Colorado. She appreciated his quiet strength and his artistry, and she did not mind the isolation of mountain life. They were not yet engaged, but Jasper could see it was only a matter of time. Thomas, now 10, was showing signs of becoming as formidable as his father. He was already tall for his age, with broad shoulders and a natural athleticism. But he also had his mother's way with words, able to tell stories that held people captive. In 1901, as the new century truly began to take hold, Jasper and Beatrice celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Tom organized a surprise party, bringing people from miles around. The cabin was filled to bursting with friends and neighbors, many of whom had their own stories of how Jasper or Beatrice had helped them over the years. During the celebration, Sheriff Cooper, now retired but still respected, stood to make a speech. "I have known Jasper Langford for over 20 years, he said. "And I can tell you that when he first brought Beatrice to town, people had opinions. They said she would ruin his peaceful life, that she would bring nothing but trouble to a man who wanted to be left alone." People laughed, and Cooper continued. "But what we all saw instead was something remarkable. We saw two people who made each other better." Jasper came out of his isolation and became part of the community again. Beatrice found the strength and safety to rebuild her life. Together, they raised fine children and built a home that became a beacon for others. They proved that love, real love, is worth any trouble it might bring. The room erupted in applause, and Jasper felt Beatrice's hand slip into his. He raised it to his lips and kissed it, gently, his eyes meeting hers across the crowded room. In that moment, with their family and friends around them, with the life they had built surrounding them, Jasper knew with absolute certainty that every choice he had made since that day Beatrice fired that warning shot had been the right one. Later, after the guests had gone and the cabin had returned to quiet, Jasper and Beatrice walked to their favorite spot, a small rise behind the cabin that offered a view of the entire valley. The moon was full, painting everything in silver light. 20 years, Beatrice said softly. "It seems like yesterday and forever at the same time." "I know what you mean," Jasper replied. "Sometimes I can still see you standing on that outcrop, scared and determined, holding that rifle like your life depended on it." "It did depend on it," she reminded him. "Or at least, I thought it did. I did not know yet that my life was about to begin, not end." "Mine too," Jasper said. "I was not really living before you, just existing. You taught me the difference." They were quiet for a moment, content in each other's presence. Then Beatrice said, "I want you to know something. If I could go back and change anything, make different choices, avoid all the hardship that led me to you, I would not. I would live through it all again, every difficult moment, because it brought me here. To you, to our children, to this life." Jasper felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I feel the same way. Every lonely year in these mountains, every moment I thought I would never connect with another person again, it was all worth it because it led to you." As they stood together on the mountain, looking out over the valley that had been their home for so long, Jasper thought about the journey they had taken. From that first chaotic meeting to this moment of peace and contentment, they had faced challenges, overcome obstacles, and built something lasting and true. The people who had warned him about Beatrice had not been wrong exactly. She had brought change, complication, and yes, a certain amount of trouble into his life. But what they had failed to understand was that trouble was not always a bad thing. Sometimes trouble was just another word for growth, for challenge, for the push that forced you out of comfortable stagnation and into real living. Beatrice had brought trouble, but she had also brought joy. And in Jasper's estimation, that joy had been worth every single moment of trouble, every complication, every challenge. It had been worth it 1,000 times over. As they turned back toward the cabin, toward their life together, Jasper knew that whatever years remained to them would be lived fully, with love and purpose and gratitude. They had built something rare and precious in these mountains, a partnership of equals, a love that had weathered storms and grown stronger, a family that would carry their legacy forward. The mountains had been his home, his refuge, his chosen isolation for so many years. But Beatrice had transformed them into something more, a place of love, of family, of belonging. She had taken his lonely retreat and made it a home in the truest sense. And as they closed the cabin door behind them, shutting out the cool night air and stepping into the warmth of the life they had created together, Jasper sent a silent thank you to whatever force of fate or fortune had sent Beatrice Walsh stumbling into his territory all those years ago. She had been lost, and so had he, though he had not realized it at the time. But together, they had found their way home. The final years of their story unfolded with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. Rose married her doctor and established a medical practice in Miles City, though she still came home often to learn new remedies from her mother and share her own discoveries. Will married his Colorado girl in 1903, and they built a cabin not far from Jasper and Beatrice's, close enough to help but far enough to maintain their own independence. He continued his furniture making, and his work became sought after throughout the territory. Thomas grew into a man of remarkable capabilities, equally comfortable tracking elk through the wilderness and negotiating business deals in town. He eventually became a guide, leading hunters and explorers through the mountains his father had shown him, always with respect for the land and the animals that called it home. Jasper and Beatrice became grandparents multiple times over, and their cabin was often filled with the sound of grandchildren's laughter. They taught the next generation the lessons they had learned: resilience, kindness, respect for nature, and the value of standing up for what was right. As they aged, their love only deepened. Jasper's hair went white and his movements slowed, but his eyes still lit up every time Beatrice entered a room. Beatrice developed arthritis in her hands but still tended her garden and her grandchildren with equal care. They moved slower, but they moved together, still partners in every sense of the word. In the spring of 1915, they celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary surrounded by 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and a community that had watched their love story unfold over decades. Tom Harris, now elderly himself, was still there, having remained a constant friend throughout all the years. "You two are the best thing that ever happened to this territory," Tom declared during the celebration. "You showed all of us what real love looks like, what real strength means. And you proved that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as trouble." Jasper and Beatrice exchanged a look, a whole conversation passing between them in that glance. They did not need words anymore, not after all these years. They knew each other's thoughts, each other's hearts as well as they knew their own. That night, as they sat together on the porch they had rebuilt twice over the years, watching the sun set over the valley for the 1,000th time, Beatrice said, "No regrets." "Not a single one," Jasper replied, his hand finding hers automatically. "You. Only that I did not find you sooner," she said. "But then again, maybe we found each other at exactly the right time, when we were both ready to appreciate what we had." "I think you are right," Jasper agreed. "I would not have been ready for you when I was younger. I needed those years alone to understand what I was missing, to appreciate what you brought to my life." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and the stars began to emerge, bright pinpoints of light in the vast Montana sky. Around them, the mountains stood watch as they had for millennia, as they would for millennia more. But for now, in this moment, they witnessed 2 people who had found in each other everything they needed: love, partnership, home. Jasper thought back to that day so long ago when Beatrice had fired that warning shot, when he had found her desperate and determined and fierce. He thought about the warnings he had received, the concerns people had expressed, the predictions of trouble. And he smiled because they had all been right and all been wrong at the same time. Beatrice had brought trouble, but she had also brought joy, love, purpose, and a family that would carry on long after both of them were gone. She had brought challenge and growth and the best years of his life. She had brought him home to himself, had shown him that isolation was not strength, but simply loneliness by another name. And if someone were to ask him now, after all these years, if the trouble had been worth it, he would laugh and say what he had always said. The trouble was nothing compared to the joy. The trouble was the price of admission to a life fully lived, to love fully experienced, to happiness fully embraced. Beatrice had brought him joy worth any trouble, and he had spent every day of their life together proving to her that she had made the right choice in trusting him with her safety, her heart, and her future. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love, a family rooted in strength and kindness, and a story that would be told in Miles City and the surrounding mountains for generations to come. The story of the mountain man who lived alone by choice, and the woman who stumbled into his life bringing trouble and transformation in equal measure. The story of 2 people who saved each other and built a life that proved love was always worth the risk, always worth the struggle, always worth any trouble it might bring. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Jasper Langford held his wife's hand and knew that he was, without question, the luckiest man who had ever lived in these mountains. And Beatrice Walsh Langford, leaning against the shoulder of the man who had given her everything, knew she was home in every way that mattered. Their story had begun with a warning shot and warnings about trouble. It ended with love, family, and a happiness so complete that it transformed everything it touched. And in the end, that was the only ending that mattered.